Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. It is very dark and it is very early on a Wednesday morning, and that is something I have not said during a non-spoiler for this show yet. If you've been following along, you know I've been watching the show with my friend Britt. We've been doing our spoiler discussion right after, so I've been getting to the non-spoiler later than I usually do when it's just me by myself. And typically it is bright and early on a Wednesday morning, but this week's episode is so damn short. It's still very dark and very early on a Wednesday morning. You know, we're going to talk about that episode at length, but there's only one thing. Well, I guess Disney Plus going to throw a wrench in that, and I guess technically there's two things now because Miss Marvel is also available. For you Miss Marvel fans, I'll get there eventually. I got some things coming for. I got a lot of boys stuff to do. I got a lot of Stranger Things stuff to finish editing. And of course, we've got this show. So if you haven't figured out what we're getting ready to talk about, like, why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in spoiler-free into Obi Wan Kenobi Part 4. And I tell you, man, I am loving this show. What Deborah Chow is doing behind the camera continues to be phenomenal stuff. The open, in particular, for this episode is some of the best stuff I think we've seen Chow do. It's one of these things that we've seen at the beginning of episodes before with her in this show, but the way in which she is handling the opening this time, oh man, dude, she does some really freaking cool stuff and continues to show just how spectacular she is behind the camera. Oh man, the opening for me is one of the things that works the best this episode. But in general, what you're getting from Chow, I mean, she's starting to incorporate like some horror elements into not necessarily the story, although the approach to some of the actions certainly brings a horror vibe. But visually, there's a moment in this episode where like there is a visual thing that's going on. And the minute the cue hits, I was like, yo, we're straight up in a horror movie right now, kinda. And it was like really cool, and she has a couple of those moments throughout the episode, and she just continues to just impress me with every outing. The other thing or people or things that are always impressing me with this show is the performances. My God, are the performances in this show so freaking good, man. I mean, what Ewan McGregor is doing from a body language, from an expression standpoint, and just his delivery. I mean, it's the most Guinness I think we've ever heard him, you know, and I was watching him interviewed talking about how he'll watch Guinness, you know, scenes of his to get the accent down like right before he goes in. But this is probably the most I think we've ever seen or heard him. And then just physically, I mean, what he does is just, it's spectacular. Someone else who's absolutely spectacular, and I know some of you are not fans out there, but I tell you, this Vivian Lyra Blair, goodness me, is this little girl so freaking talented, man. I mean, there are moments in this episode where it's like, I've heard people kind of like, not necessarily criticizing her, but like, you know, she's a little girl, and sometimes you get little girl things and little girl acting, and some of those moments haven't quite hit, like that chase sequence in the first episode. But this is where, like, I've been saying, you know, a decent clip during the course of the show, like, you really are seeing a performance from her at all times, and this really highlights it. Like, yes, physically, she's a 10-year-old girl. There's only so much that she can do, and when you're talking about running and avoiding danger, it can look a little wonky. But this episode, you have her, like, sitting down, and in the same shot, in the same scene, you're seeing her look like a lost little girl and then flip into that Carrie Fisher Leia. And the one thing that me and Britt were talking about during our spoiler discussion that you guys will see later on is how often you just can kind of like feel the Carrie Fisher vibe flowing through Blair. And she's just, I mean, anybody that's going to criticize, I'd like to see you do what this girl is doing at 10 years old. Now, as an adult, because I bet you probably can. Man, super impressive. As is Moses Ingram, who is the other big piece in this episode. What Ingram continues to do, I continue to find impressive. And one of the other things that me and Britt talked about during the spoiler stuff is, like, people kind of been on her because she's a little annoying, you know, a little irritating. And it's like, you know who else was annoying and irritating? Anakin Skywalker. And you know who else was kind of annoying and irritating at the beginning? Ahsoka. I think we're seeing a pattern. You know, if you are attached to Anakin Skywalker in some way from a like mentor position, a lot of Anakin's traits kind of pass over, which is why I continue to say I think there's some sort of history between the two of them that hopefully maybe episode 5 will shed some light on. Episode 4, spoilers, does not, although it continues to tease a little bit about Moses Ingram's. This episode she actually kind of hints at, or not hints, but like references her past and things that happen. I was like, I need to see what's going on there. But what Moses Ingram is doing, one, shame on any of you people who were sending her the despicable and racist DMs that you were sending her. That has no place here. That has no place in Star Wars. It has no place anywhere, to be quite honest. And, you know, for those people, like I said, shame on you. Other people, if you have issues, hey, man, everybody's got their own thing. But I personally think what Moses Ingram is doing is just spectacular, man. She's been so good. And in all honesty, this is probably some of her best stuff this episode. I think the character seems maybe the most focused that she's been. And I think because of what her mission is for this episode, and it's so specific, she's really able to hone in and lock in on what she's doing. And I really continue to enjoy what we're getting from Ingram, and I'm hoping that the story is gonna ultimately give me this satisfying taste left over in my mouth, where then when you look back at everything that Ingram's been doing, it'll just pop all the more. And then the other person that you have to talk about, I mean, Hayden Christensen, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's not in this episode a ton, but I don't think that should shock anybody. Me and Britt also talked during our spoiler conversation that, like, you know, one of the things about Vader is it's so much lore and mythos, right? Like, we haven't really seen a lot of the things that we've heard about, and I think that plays into the fear. And unless you're doing something that is directly telling a Darth Vader story, while we want a lot of him in this because of that brotherhood that he has with Obi Wan and how important that is to the show, sprinkling Darth Vader in is very, very smart. And I hope we get more Anakin at some point. We obviously still are kind of lacking in the helmet off Hayden, you know, but what he is doing in the suit, and remember, I mean, we've heard Ewan McGregor reference multiple times being opposite of Hayden inside the suit and how scary it is. And we've seen Hayden talk about being in the suit. We know it's him. And he has a moment in this episode where, like, you're just like, dude, within a second of seeing this dude, you know exactly what he's doing. You know where he's headed. Like, his body language is just so focused, and the acting that's going on there, like, it's one of these things where you just sit there and you go, again, this is a moment where you sit and you go, that's why you put Hayden in the suit. And all that stuff continues to just really, really work quite well in this show, as are the visual effects. I mean, like I said, there's this one moment where you kind of get a bit of a horror vibe, but it has also got a very, very distinct visual to what's going on in the scene, and Chow and this team continue to give really spectacular visuals. I mean, we spend some time on Mustafar this episode, and in particular the Inquisitorial Fortress, which, I mean, logically you would imagine that's where we were going. You know, Reva's got Leia. So, like, what you look at, and specifically how Chow uses lighting to her advantage, I mean, the technical elements of the show are spectacular. And the other thing that I'm really digging is, in fact, the story. And this is one of these things where I said to Britt, when you're looking at the show as a whole, you step back and you look at it from like a wide perspective, I really dig with what they're doing from a story standpoint. And up until this episode, I didn't necessarily really feel too much lacking, even in some of the episodes that were coming down. You know, we've been gradually, it feels like, coming down from an hour. And this week we end up with about 35 minutes of Obi-Wan television. Like, that's all we get this week. It's the shortest episode, and it feels the shortest. And it hinders the episode because, you know, we talked about, specifically in episode 1, like, that for me has still been the strongest because it does the best work from the story perspective and just showing you what this show can do. Episode 3 for me, obviously, that's your big pop episode. Vader shows up. You get your first clash with Obi-Wan. That stuff is great. And Episode 2, being released on the same day as Episode 1, just kind of felt like it connected and really fleshed out that story where you got about, like 80-something, 80, almost 90 minutes of content on that first day. So you kind of like, you don't feel it too much. And the Dio story was, enjoyable. It's a fun little run. But you get to this episode, and like I said, I think there's some really good stuff in here. We get some great Obi-Wan things. You get that one moment for Vader. You get some really excellent, Reva stuff opposite Leia, which, again, that's not really a spoiler. Shouldn't shock you. She captures her at the end of the last episode, so that moment where you finally get to see the two of them opposite each other, you get some really, really good stuff there. There's some really tense moments. There is a reveal in this episode that I think is fascinating, and I can't wait to see where we go. But in between all of those things, this show is moving too fast. It's one of those things where, like, it almost kind of feels like a fan film in the sense that, like, you don't have all the resources that a major studio has. You're going to try to tell this story that we've never really touched on before. It's not canon, but it could be kind of fun if you worked it in. And with what you have resource-wise, you just try to do as much as you possibly can. And in a scenario like that, you might get 35 minutes of storytelling where you kind of have to make some big jumps because that's your one opportunity. Problem here is that Disney is not a fan film making place and is not a fan making a film. Disney is a massive studio with lots of financial capabilities, which is why the show looks so damn stunning all the time. And it's just one of those things where I continue to not understand why Disney continues to do this with all of its television programming, right? Like, it's not a Marvel thing. It's not a Star Wars thing. This is a Disney thing. And, I mean, HBO and Showtime and pay-for cable television has existed for a long time, and almost all of their one-hour dramas are, guess what? 1 hour in length. And you look at something like Netflix and Stranger Things. Every episode in this new season is over an hour and 5 and 10 minutes long. And the finale, when we get to part 2, the last 2 episodes are going to be like 1:45 and 2 hours. And it's one of those things like, yeah, can you go too long on an episode? Absolutely. But I think television has been being made inside the context of 60 minutes for a long enough period of time where, like, we shouldn't be struggling this bad or having these types of issues. And look, I get that sometimes you might have a shorter episode because the story just dictates that. Like I said, the first couple episodes, none of them are an hour in length, but it didn't really hit too hard or impact too much. But this one, you do some massive jumps in storytelling and you move things really, really quickly in certain moments where it just doesn't feel like the really awesome stuff that we get in the episode is necessarily 100% earned. And it feels like Disney is operating in the traditional cable sense, right? Where it's like you have an hour to get programming in with commercials, which cut down comes to about 40 minutes, which is what a lot of these episodes land in. And then if you have a story that you feel needs to be a little bit shorter, then you're in 35 minutes. And I don't have an issue with length. I've seen Mandalorian, I've seen some of the Marvel shows take the shorter episodes and actually turn out really, really high quality stuff inside of the storytelling. And it's just that doesn't happen in this episode, unfortunately. And it's the one that kind of feels the most rushed, and it feels like the least earned from the things that we're getting. I think from the overall story, the big points and the things that we hit in this episode make a ton of sense. I think they work. It just could have used 10 or 15 more minutes to earn some of those things and flesh out some of those story ideas. But yeah, I mean, you end up in just kind of one of these conundrums where it's like, what I'm getting is really good, and I really just want it to feel like it's taking the time to do everything that it needs to do, and that it's not rushing anything. And I was hoping that we were kind of headed that way with the way the show was moving, in the sense that, like, we were accomplishing things every episode, and while we accomplished something here, I don't know. Like, one of the other things me and Britt were talking about is, like, I don't know where we're going to go next episode, per se. Like, I know Obi-Wan is on the run, and we know people are chasing him, but, like, outside of that, like, I don't know. I don't think that the episode really even teed up or set up what comes next week that well. And that ultimately hurts this one. So those are all of my non-spoiler thoughts. Let's get the C-Maniacs up and give this bad boy a score. Like I said, phenomenal directing from Chow. Fantastic acting across the board. Spectacular visuals. And really strong visual storytelling. And really quality story points in this episode. And things that are important. And things that not only I think are important to this story, but important to the overall canon. There's a moment in this episode where you can kind of sit there and go, maybe Filoni and co are playing with something here that maybe comes in down the road a little bit. And while all that stuff is really working quite well, the length of the episode I think really hinders this one, and it makes it my least favorite. And it's not even like I say least favorite, and it's not like a bad thing, because everything in here, I think that there's really good stuff. It's just, it doesn't feel earned. It feels rushed. And, like, literally, the first thing out of my friend Brittany's mouth was, it was too short. Like, as soon as the episode ended, like, it was too short. I needed more. And in this instance, not having more and being the length that this is hurt this episode to the point where I gotta go 3.5 out of 5 on this one. Like I said, I think this could have been a 4 or 4.5 easy, because there's some really cool things in this episode. It just moved a little too fast for the Seaman. So I'm gonna go 3.5 out of 5 C-Maniacs for part 4 of Obi Wan Kenobi. I'm gonna need a big bounce back next week. And like I said, I think while I don't know where we're headed, I think some of the things that are out here to be addressed could lead to really cool things in the last 2 episodes. But this one makes me a little bit nervous on what the storytelling is going to be like if these episodes don't increase in length. This is that episode where length really hindered, and now I'm like, if you continue to shortchange, is this going to ultimately hinder the show? So we'll see where we end up. But 3.5 out of 5 C-Maniacs for part 4. I still like what we're doing. I still like where we're going story-wise. I still think there's a lot of quality here. Just please, 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 Disney, these last 2 episodes, let this team really flesh out and earn the things that are going to happen, because I think there could be some big things coming. But that's everything I got. Now it's your turn. I want to know what you're thinking, man. No spoilers. This is spoiler-free. You'll get the spoiler in the next day or 2. We'll get the reactions and spoiler review with me and Britt up. There we can go into massive detail, but keep it spoiler-free. Just tell me what was working and not working for you this episode. Did the length hinder you? Did you feel the shortness on this one? Who, acting-wise, was popping for you? Tala, I know her first name is Ilaria. I can never remember her last name. But, like, she is, I think, a prime example of the issue with this episode. She does some really great stuff on an acting standpoint. There's some really interesting elements to her story. But some of the things that happen, you're just like, that's where we go. So what's working or not working like that for you? You know, who's standing out? What things are you noticing? What's popping? Keep it spoiler free, but put it all down below in the comments section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with C-Man anytime. We're talking movies, TV, trailer reactions. You want to be here for my Stranger Things, my boys coverage, Obi Wan Kenobi, man. You want to be here every Wednesday. You haven't. You want to show a little love support to this old crazy guy. Well, hey, super easy. All you gotta do, jump over there, hit that subscribe button, come join C-Maniac Nation, hit that little bell if you want those alerts, and until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down, I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace. Oh, hey, what's going on? You must be sticking around because you're looking for more content featuring this guy. Well, guess what? You're in the right place. You can check out more videos right here and right here. And if you have and you want to come join that C-Maniac Nation, you can hit that subscribe right over there.